The audience laughed when she showed out. But one performance made everyone cry. The small town of Riverbrook wasn't kind to dreamers. It was the kind of place where people were born, lived quiet lives, and eventually died without ever causing much of a stir. That's what made Rose Chen stand out like a sore thumb. At 32 years old, Rose wasn't what anyone would call a typical small-town woman. Her clothes were always a touch too bright, her laugh a bit too loud, and her dreams way too big for a place like Riverbrook. While most folks her age had settled into predictable routines, marriage, kids, steady jobs at the factory or the school, Rose still held on to hopes that many thought she should have outgrown by now. She's got her head in the clouds, the older ladies would whisper at the grocery store when Rose walked by. Such a shame. Not getting any younger, you know. Rose heard these whispers, of course. In a town with only one stoplight, secrets traveled faster than the morning train. But she'd gotten used to them over the years, the same way she'd gotten used to the pitying looks from her former classmates who now had houses with white picket fences and minivans parked in their driveways. What nobody in town really understood was that Rose had put her dreams on hold for a good reason. For the past 5 years, she had been taking care of her mother, who was slowly losing her fight against cancer. Their small apartment above the town's only bookstore had turned into a makeshift nursing home. The living room where Rose had once practiced her dance moves as a teenager was now filled with medical equipment, pill bottles, and the steady beep of machines that kept track of her mother's weakening heart. During the day, Rose worked as a receptionist at Dr. Wilson's dental office, answering phones and scheduling appointments with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. But at night, after her mother had fallen asleep, Rose would clear a small space in the cramped kitchen and practice. She would plug her earbuds into her old phone, turn the volume low enough not to wake her mother, and dance. Sometimes she would sing quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Other times she would act out scenes from plays she had downloaded from the internet, mouthing the words silently in front of the smudged mirror they kept propped against the refrigerator. It wasn't the bright lights of a real stage, but in those stolen moments Rose felt alive. It was her escape, the one place where she could forget about the bills piling up on the counter, or the way her mother's face seemed to grow thinner with each passing day. "You've got a gift," her mother would tell her whenever she caught Rose practicing. "The world needs to see it." Rose would just smile and kiss her mother's forehead. "The world can wait," she'd say. "You're more important." But lately her mother had been pushing harder. Maybe it was because she knew her time was running out. Or maybe she was just tired of seeing her daughter put life on hold. "I don't want to be your excuse," she had said one evening, her voice weak but her eyes fierce. "I want to see you try before I go." Rose had tried to change the subject, but her mother wouldn't let it drop. "Promise me," she'd insisted, gripping Rose's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll put yourself out there. Just once." It was that promise that led Rose to the community theater on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, clutching a flyer that announced open auditions for the town's annual talent showcase. The showcase was a big deal in Riverbrook, the one night a year when the whole town came together to celebrate local talent. Winners from previous years had gone on to perform in bigger cities, and a few had even made it as far as state competitions. Rose stood outside the theater for nearly 20 minutes, watching people come and go. Young kids with dance bags slung over their shoulders, teenagers with guitars and bright, confident smiles, even a few older folks carrying sheet music and wearing their Sunday best. 3 times Rose turned to leave, and 3 times she stopped herself. The promise she'd made to her mother kept her feet planted on the sidewalk, even as her heart raced and her palms grew sweaty. "You coming in or what?" The voice belonged to an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He was holding the door open, looking at Rose with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. "Auditions end at 5 and it's almost 4:30. Rose took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I'm coming in." The inside of the theater was smaller than she had imagined, with maybe 100 seats facing a modest stage. A table had been set up in front of the first row, where 3 people sat with clipboards and bored expressions. There were about a dozen other people scattered throughout the seats, some warming up their voices, others reviewing notes or stretching. Rose signed her name on the sheet at the door and took a seat in the back row, trying her best to blend into the shadows. She watched as performer after performer took the stage, A teenage boy played the violin with his eyes closed, swaying to the music. A middle-aged woman sang an opera piece that made Rose's skin prickle with goosebumps. A group of young girls performed a dance routine that had clearly been choreographed by a professional. With each performance, Rose felt smaller and smaller. What had she been thinking? These people had real talent, years of training. Some had even hired coaches to prepare them specifically for this audition. And what did she have? A few dance moves she had taught herself in her kitchen and a voice that had never been heard outside her shower. Rose Chen. The sound of her name being called jolted her from her thoughts. The man at the table was looking around the theater, his pen poised above his clipboard. Rose Chen? Is there a Rose Chen here? Rose stood up slowly, her legs feeling like jelly. That's me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're up, he said, gesturing toward the stage. The walk from her seat to the stage felt like the longest journey of Rose's life. She could feel eyes on her, curious, judging, waiting. By the time she climbed the 3 small steps to the stage, her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Whenever you're ready, said a woman at the table, not bothering to look up from her notes. You have 3 minutes. Rose had practiced for this moment hundreds of times in her tiny kitchen. She had chosen a song that showed off her range, not too ambitious but not too simple either. She had worked out a simple routine that included a few dance moves she was particularly proud of. In her kitchen, in front of her mother, it had seemed perfect. But standing on that stage, with the bright lights making her squint and the empty seat stretching out before her like a sea of judgment, Rose forgot everything. The first notes of the music began to play from the theater's speakers, and her mind went completely blank. She opened her mouth to sing, but only a small squeak came out. Someone in the back row coughed. The woman at the table glanced up, one eyebrow raised. Rose closed her eyes and tried again. This time she managed to find her voice, but it came out shaky and off-key. She tried to recover by launching into the dance moves she had practiced, but her foot caught on a loose board on the stage. She stumbled, arms flailing as she fought to keep her balance. That's when she heard it. A snicker from somewhere in the audience. Then another, and another. Soon a wave of uncomfortable laughter rippled through the small theater. Face burning with shame, Rose somehow made it through the rest of her routine. Her voice cracked on the high notes. Her dancing, which had seemed so smooth in her kitchen, now looked awkward and clumsy under the harsh stage lights. By the time the music ended, there were tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Thank you, said the man at the table, his voice kind but dismissive. We'll be in touch. More laughter followed Rose as she hurried off the stage, keeping her head down to hide the tears that were now freely flowing down her cheeks. She grabbed her bag and rushed toward the exit, wanting nothing more than to escape the humiliation that pressed in on her from all sides. Hey, wait, a voice called after her, but Rose didn't stop. She pushed through the door and out into the rain, which had started falling harder while she was inside. It matched her mood perfectly. A gray, hopeless downpour that soaked through her clothes and mingled with her tears. The promise she had made to her mother now seemed like a cruel joke. Who was she kidding? She wasn't an entertainer. She wasn't special. She was just Rose Chen from Riverbrook, a woman with dreams too big for her small-town reality. What Rose didn't know, as she walked home in the rain that day, was that the universe had plans for her that were bigger and more surprising than anything she could have imagined, and that sometimes the most painful failures are just the beginning of something beautiful. The walk home from the theater was the longest of Rose's life. Each step felt heavier than the last as the rain soaked through her clothes and plastered her hair to her face. She couldn't tell anymore which was rain and which was tears, but it didn't matter. No one in Riverbrook would notice either way. They were all too busy with their own lives to care about another of Rose Chen's failures. By the time she reached the narrow staircase that led up to their apartment, Rose had almost convinced herself that she would never mention the audition to her mother. What good would it do? It would only break her heart to know that her daughter had been laughed off the stage. But when Rose pushed open the apartment door, her mother was sitting up in her bed by the window, awake and alert, one of her good days. The moment she saw Rose's face, damp and blotchy from crying, she knew. "Oh, honey," she said, opening her arms. "Come here." Rose dropped her bag by the door and crossed the room, falling into her mother's embrace like she was a little girl again. The familiar smell of her mother's talcum powder and the herbal tea she drank for nausea was comforting. even as Rose noticed how much thinner her arms had become. It was awful. "Mom," Rose whispered, her voice breaking. "They laughed at me. All of them." Her mother stroked her wet hair. "Tell me everything," so Rose did. She told her about freezing on stage, about forgetting the words to the song, about tripping during her dance routine. She told her about the snickers that turned into full-blown laughter, and about the pitying look on the judge's face when he dismissed her. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she took Rose's face in her hands, her touch gentle but firm. "Do you know why I wanted you to audition?" she asked. Rose shook her head. "Because I've watched you put your life on hold for me for 5 years now." 5 years, Rose, that's too much to ask of anyone, especially someone with your gifts. "Mom, no, let me finish," her mother said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I'm not going to be here much longer. We both know that. And when I'm gone, what will you have? A job you don't love in a town that doesn't appreciate you, surrounded by people who don't understand you. I couldn't bear it if that was my legacy to you." Fresh tears welled in Rose's eyes. "Don't talk like that. You're not going anywhere." Her mother smiled sadly. "We both know better than that. Now listen to me. I want you to promise me something else." "Anything," Rose whispered. "Promise me you won't give up." Not because of what happened today. Rose started to protest, but her mother cut her off. "One bad day doesn't define you. One audience doesn't determine your worth. Promise me you'll try again." It was the last thing Rose wanted to do. The thought of going back on stage, of exposing herself to more ridicule, made her stomach turn. But the look in her mother's eyes, that mix of hope and fear and love, was impossible to resist. "I promise," Rose said. Though she had no idea how she would keep it, her mother seemed satisfied with that. She leaned back against her pillows, suddenly looking tired again. "Good. Now help me with my pills, would you? And then tell me about the other performers. I bet they weren't half as interesting as you." The next morning, Rose woke to the sound of her phone ringing. She fumbled for it on her nightstand, blinking sleep from her eyes. The number on the screen wasn't one she recognized. "Hello?" she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Is this Rose Chen?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, this is she. This is Tom Whitaker from the Riverbrook Community Theater. I'm calling about your audition yesterday." Rose sat up straight in bed, her heart suddenly racing. "Oh yes, I'm sorry about that. I know it was terrible. Actually," Tom interrupted, "that's not why I'm calling. I wanted to let you know that you've been selected to participate in the showcase." Rose was sure she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You've been selected," Tom repeated. "The showcase is in 3 weeks. Rehearsals start next Monday at 6 p.m. "But why?" Rose couldn't help asking. Everyone was laughing. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Look, I'll be honest with you. We usually put 1 or 2, let's call them crowd pleasers, in the show. Acts that might not be technically perfect, but that the audience responds to." Rose's stomach dropped. They wanted her as the joke act, the one people would come to laugh at. Before she could respond, Tom continued, "But that's not the only reason. There was something about your audition, even with all the mistakes. Something real. Raw. Most of these performers, they're so polished they're practically plastic. You were different. And different can be good." Rose didn't know what to say. Was this a compliment or just a nicer way of telling her she was the pity selection? "You don't have to decide right now," Tom said when the silence stretched too long. "Think about it and let me know by Friday. But I hope you'll say yes." After hanging up, Rose sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to call Tom back immediately and tell him no. The thought of getting back on that stage made her feel physically ill. But another part of her remembered the promise she had made to her mother. And an even smaller, quieter part wondered if maybe, just maybe, Tom had seen something in her performance that was worth developing. In the end, it was her mother who made the decision for her. "Of course you're going to do it," she said when Rose told her about the call. "This is your chance to show them who you really are. But what if they're just setting me up to be the joke act?" Rose asked, voicing her biggest fear. Her mother waved away the concern. "Then you make sure you're the best damn joke they've ever seen. You turn it around on them. Make them laugh with you, not at you." It was easier said than done, but Rose knew better than to argue. When her mother got that determined look in her eyes, there was no changing her mind. So on Friday, Rose called Tom back and accepted the spot in the showcase. The following Monday, she arrived at the theater 30 minutes early, her stomach in knots. She had spent the weekend practicing her routine over and over in their tiny kitchen, determined not to repeat the disaster of her audition. But as she pushed open the heavy theater door, all her confidence evaporated. The stage was lit up and several people were already there, chatting and laughing like old friends. Rose recognized some of them from the auditions. The violin player, the opera singer, the dance group. They all looked so at ease, so sure of themselves. "Rose, you made it." Tom emerged from backstage, clipboard in hand. "I was hoping you'd come. Let me introduce you to everyone." Before she could protest, he was leading her toward the group, calling out names and roles. Rose smiled and nodded, trying to remember everyone, but their names blurred together in her anxiety. She could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging. Did they know she was the joke act? Were they laughing at her behind their polite smiles? "And this is Liam," Tom said, stopping in front of a tall man with kind eyes and a guitar case slung over his shoulder. "He's our musical director. He'll be working with you on your piece." Liam extended a hand and Rose shook it hesitantly. "Nice to meet you, Rose. Tom's been telling me about you." Rose winced. "All bad things, I'm sure." Liam laughed, a warm sound that didn't have an ounce of mockery in it. "Actually, he said you had something special. Raw talent that just needs a little polishing. I'm looking forward to working with you." Rose blinked in surprise. Was he being sincere? Or was this some elaborate setup to make her look even more foolish? Before she could decide, Tom clapped his hands for everyone's attention. "All right, people. We've got 3 weeks to put together the best showcase this town has ever seen. Let's get to work." The next 2 weeks were a blur of rehearsals, coaching sessions, and more practice than Rose had ever done in her life. Every night after work, she would rush to the theater, where Liam would be waiting with his guitar and his endless patience. They worked on her singing technique, on her breathing, on finding the emotional core of her performance. "You're thinking too much," Liam told her during one particularly frustrating session. "You're so worried about getting every note perfect that you're forgetting to feel the music. This isn't about technical perfection, it's about connecting with the audience." "Easy for you to say," Rose muttered. "You weren't the one they laughed at." Liam put down his guitar and looked at her seriously. "No, I wasn't, but I've been laughed at plenty of times in my life." "Everyone has. The difference is what you do with it. Do you let it define you or do you use it?" "Use it? How?" "Channel it. Use that embarrassment, that anger, that hurt. Put it into your performance. Make them feel what you felt. That's what makes a performance unforgettable." It was good advice, but Rose wasn't sure she knew how to follow it. And as the days passed, a new worry was growing in the back of her mind. Her mother was getting worse. The good days were becoming fewer and farther between. Some mornings she was too weak to even get out of bed. Rose considered dropping out of the showcase, but every time she brought it up, her mother would shake her head firmly. "Don't you dare," she would say. "This showcase is happening. I will be there if I have to crawl." But as the final week of rehearsals began, even Rose's mother had to admit that might not be possible. The doctor had increased her pain medication, which kept her asleep most of the day. When she was awake, she was often confused, mixing up days and people. Rose was torn between her promise to her mother and the reality of her condition. How could she focus on a silly talent show when her mother was slipping away? But how could she break the promise that meant so much to both of them? The answer came in a form Rose never expected, and it would change everything. 2 days before the showcase, Rose's phone rang while she was in the middle of rehearsal. She had been working with Liam on a particularly difficult section of her song when the familiar ringtone cut through the music. Normally, she would have ignored it, but her mother's condition had been worsening and she kept her phone close at all times. "Sorry," she murmured to Liam as she stepped away to answer. "Hello? Rose Chen?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes, this is she. This is Nurse Patty from Riverbrook Medical Center. I'm calling about your mother, Mei Chen." Rose's heart dropped. "What's happened? Is she okay?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "She's been admitted to the hospital. Her home health aide found her unresponsive this morning and called an ambulance." The world seemed to tilt beneath Rose's feet. "Unresponsive? What does that mean?" "Is she? She's stable for now," Nurse Patty said quickly. "But the doctor would like to speak with you as soon as possible." "How quickly can you get here?" "I'm on my way right now," Rose said, already gathering her things. She hung up and turned to find Liam watching her with concern. "Everything okay?" he asked, though it was clear from his expression that he knew it wasn't. "My mom's in the hospital," Rose said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears, distant and hollow. "I have to go." Liam nodded, no questions asked. "Of course. Do you need a ride?" Rose started to decline. She didn't want to impose. But then she thought about the bus schedule. The next one wouldn't come for 20 minutes, and then it was a 30-minute ride to the hospital. "Actually, yes, if you don't mind." "Not at all," Liam said, already packing up his guitar. "Let's go." The drive to the hospital was a blur. Rose stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of Riverbrook slide past without really seeing them. Liam didn't try to fill the silence with empty reassurances, and Rose was grateful for that. There was nothing to say that would make this better, and they both knew it. When they pulled up to the hospital entrance, Liam put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. "Do you want me to come in with you?" he asked. Rose was touched by the offer. They'd only known each other for 2 weeks, and yet here he was, ready to sit through what could be hours of waiting in a hospital corridor for someone he'd never even met. But she shook her head. "Thank you, but I should do this alone." Liam nodded. "I understand. But if you need anything, a ride home, someone to talk to, anything at all, just call me. Okay?" "Okay," Rose promised, though she had no intention of calling. Liam had his own life, his own concerns. He didn't need to be burdened with hers. Rose found her mother in a private room on the 3rd floor. The sight of her nearly broke Rose's heart. May had always been small, but now she looked tiny, swallowed up by the hospital bed and the tangle of tubes and wires connected to her. Her skin had a grayish tint and her breathing was shallow. A doctor was checking her vitals when Rose entered. He looked up and gave her a somber nod. "Miss Chen, I'm Dr. Howard. I've been overseeing your mother's care." "How is she?" Rose asked, moving to her mother's side and taking her hand. It felt cool and dry, so different from the warm, strong hands that had comforted Rose throughout her life. Dr. Howard's expression was gentle but serious. "I'm afraid it's not good news. The cancer has spread to her brain. That's what caused her to lose consciousness this morning." "But she's going to wake up, right?" Rose asked, though deep down she already knew the answer. Dr. Howard hesitated. "She may have periods of consciousness, yes, but they will likely be brief and increasingly rare. I'm sorry, but we're looking at days now, not weeks." The words hit Rose like a physical blow. She'd known her mother was dying, had known it for months, but somehow she'd never truly believed it would happen. There had always been a tiny part of her that expected a miracle, a last-minute reprieve. "Is she in pain?" Rose asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not right now," Dr. Howard assured her. "We've got her on medication to keep her comfortable. But if you have any other family members who would want to say goodbye, I would suggest calling them soon." There was no one else to call. It had been just Rose and her mother since her father died when Rose was 11. No siblings, no close relatives. Just the two of them against the world. "Thank you, doctor," Rose said mechanically. "Can I stay with her?" "Of course. I'll have a nurse bring in a cot for you." With a final sympathetic look, Dr. Howard left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Rose pulled a chair up to her mother's bedside and sat down, still holding her hand. "I'm here, Mom," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if her mother could hear her. "I'm not going anywhere." Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medication. Outside the window, the sun set and darkness fell. Rose remained at her mother's side, talking softly to her, reminiscing about happy memories, telling her all the things she'd never found the courage to say before. "Remember when I was 7 and I wanted to be in the school play so badly?" Rose said, stroking her mother's hand. "But I was too scared to audition. And you told me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway." She smiled at the memory. "You walked me to school that day and waited outside the auditorium the whole time. And when I came out crying because I didn't get the part, you didn't tell me it would be okay. You told me you were proud of me for trying, that it mattered more that I had been brave enough to try." Tears slipped down Rose's cheeks. "I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. I got so caught up in the fear of failing that I stopped trying. But you never gave up on me, did you? You kept pushing me to be brave even when it would have been easier to let me hide." As if in response, May's hand twitched in Rose's grasp. Rose gasped, leaning closer. "Mom, can you hear me?" Slowly. Painfully, May's eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy with medication and pain, but they found Rose's face and focused there. "Rose," she whispered, her voice so faint that Rose had to lean in to hear it. "My brave girl." "Mom," Rose choked out, joy and grief tangling in her chest. "I'm here. I'm right here." May's lips curved in a small smile. "The showcase," she murmured. "Tomorrow?" Rose shook her head. "No, Mom, it's not important. I'm staying here with you." But May's face hardened with a determination that Rose recognized all too well. Even now, even here, her mother was still fighting. "Promise," she whispered. "You promised." "That was before—" "No excuses," May interrupted, each word clearly an effort. "You will go." "You will sing for me, Mom, please." "I can't leave you." "You can," May insisted. "I'll wait." Rose wanted to argue, but she could see her mother's energy fading. Her eyelids were growing heavy again, the brief moment of clarity slipping away. "Okay," Rose whispered, though the words felt like broken glass in her throat. "I promise," May smiled again, satisfied. "Good," she breathed. Then her eyes drifted closed and she was gone again, back to that place where Rose couldn't follow. Rose stayed awake all night, watching her mother breathe, terrified that each rise and fall of her chest might be the last. But morning came and May was still with her. Weak, unconscious, but still fighting. Around noon there was a soft knock on the door. Rose looked up, expecting another nurse, but it was Liam who stood there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "I hope it's okay that I came," he said hesitantly. "I called the hospital to check on you and they said you'd been here all night. I thought you might need— well, I don't know what you might need, but I wanted to check." Rose was too exhausted and emotionally drained to pretend she wasn't glad to see him. "Come in," she said, gesturing to the chair on the other side of her mother's bed. "This is my mom, May." Liam set the flowers on the windowsill and sat down, his eyes taking in the scene. The machines, the tubes, Rose's haggard face. "How is she?" "Not good," Rose said simply. "The doctor says it's just a matter of days. Maybe even hours." Liam's face filled with sympathy. "Rose, I'm so sorry." "I had no idea it was this bad," Rose shrugged. "I didn't tell anyone. It was easier that way." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor and the hiss of the oxygen machine. Finally, Liam cleared his throat. "I know this isn't the time, but Tom asked me to check if you're still planning to perform tomorrow. The showcase, I mean." Rose looked at her mother's peaceful face. "I promised her I would," she said softly. "She woke up last night and made me promise. But I don't see how I can leave her, not when—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Liam understood. "What if we change the song?" he suggested. "Something simpler, more meaningful. Something for her." Rose looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well," Liam said, leaning forward, "what was her favorite song? Or a song that meant something special to both of you?" Rose thought about it. "There's a lullaby she used to sing to me when I was little. She said her mother sang it to her, and her mother before that. It's in Mandarin, though. Even better," Liam said. "It's authentic, personal, and you wouldn't need to dance or do anything flashy. Just sing from your heart." For the first time in days, a glimmer of possibility lit up in Rose's mind. Maybe this was how she could keep her promise. Not with the elaborate performance she'd been rehearsing, but with something simple and true. A tribute to her mother, a way to honor everything she'd taught her. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "What if I mess it up again? What if they laugh?" Liam looked her straight in the eye. "They won't laugh," he said with such conviction that Rose almost believed him. "Not at this. And even if they did, would it matter? This isn't for them. It's for her." Rose looked at her mother again, at the face she'd known and loved her entire life. The face that was slipping away from her day by day, hour by hour. What would May want her to do? The answer came to her with surprising clarity. Her mother would want her to be brave. Not fearless, but brave enough to try despite the fear. Just like she'd taught her all those years ago. "Okay," Rose said, her decision made. "But I can't leave her alone. Not tonight." "What if I stay with her?" Liam offered. "Just for the hour or two you'd need for the showcase. That way she won't be alone and you can keep your promise." Rose was stunned by the offer. "You would do that?" "You don't even know her," Liam smiled. "I know her daughter. That's enough for me." In that moment, something shifted between them. a connection deeper than mentor and student, more personal than mere friendship. And for the first time since her mother had fallen ill, Rose felt a tiny spark of hope for the future, a future she couldn't quite see yet, but one that suddenly seemed possible again. The day of the showcase arrived with a gray, misty morning that matched Rose's mood. She had spent another night at the hospital, curled uncomfortably on the cot beside her mother's bed, waking at every change in the beeping monitors, every small sound from the hallway. By morning, Rose was exhausted, her body aching and her mind foggy with lack of sleep. But her mother was still hanging on, still fighting. The nurses said it was remarkable. Many patients in May's condition wouldn't have lasted this long. "She's waiting for something," one of them had said kindly. "Some people need permission to go, and others need to finish something important first." Rose knew what her mother was waiting for. She was holding on for the showcase, for Rose's promise to be fulfilled. The thought filled her with equal parts determination and dread. How could she possibly get up on stage and sing when her heart was breaking? But how could she not when it might be the last thing she ever did for her mother? Around noon, Liam arrived as promised, guitar case in one hand and a small duffel bag in the other. "I brought you a change of clothes," he explained, handing her the bag, "and some toiletries. I thought you might want to freshen up before tonight." Rose was touched by his thoughtfulness. She hadn't even considered what she would wear to the showcase. She'd been wearing the same clothes for 2 days straight, and they were wrinkled and stale from her long hours at the hospital. "Thank you," she said, taking the bag. "That was really kind of you." Liam shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. "It's nothing. I just want to help." Rose went to the small bathroom attached to her mother's room and washed her face with cold water, trying to wake herself up. In the mirror, a pale, hollow-eyed stranger looked back at her. She barely recognized herself. The dark circles under her eyes, the tightness around her mouth, the flatness in her gaze. With shaky hands, she brushed her teeth with the toothbrush Liam had brought, then changed into the clean clothes. Simple black pants and a soft blue sweater that was a little too big for her but comfortable. When she emerged, Liam was sitting by her mother's bed, talking softly to her as though she could hear him. "Really talented," he was saying. "I don't think she even realizes how good she is. But you know that already, don't you?" "You've always known." Rose froze in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt the one-sided conversation. There was something so tender in the way Liam was speaking to her unconscious mother, so respectful and genuine. "She's going to be amazing tonight," Liam continued. "I've never heard her sing this song before, but I can tell it means a lot to her. And to you too, I'm guessing. I promise I'll help her through it. You don't have to worry." A lump formed in Rose's throat. She cleared it softly, and Liam looked up, a flash of embarrassment crossing his face when he realized she had overheard him. "Sorry," he said. "I just thought, well, they say people in comas can still hear sometimes." "Don't apologize," Rose said, her voice thick with emotion. "It was nice. I think she'd like knowing someone else is looking out for me." Liam nodded, then checked his watch. "It's almost 2. The showcase starts at 7, but they want everyone there by 5 for final preparations. Do you think you'll be ready to go by 4:30? Rose glanced at her mother's still form. The thought of leaving her, even for a couple of hours, was almost unbearable. What if something happened while she was gone? What if these were their last hours together, and Rose missed them because of a silly talent show? But then she remembered the fierce determination in her mother's eyes when she had made Rose promise. "You will go. You will sing, for me." It wasn't a request, it was a command. And in all her life, Rose had never been able to refuse her mother when she used that tone. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll be ready." The next few hours passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Rose practiced the lullaby quietly, her voice sometimes breaking on the familiar Mandarin words. Liam helped where he could, working out a simple guitar accompaniment that complemented the traditional melody without overpowering it. At one point, Rose thought she saw her mother's lips move slightly, as if trying to sing along, but it might have been her imagination. At 4:30, Rose stood by her mother's bedside, her hands trembling as she leaned down to kiss her forehead. "I'm going now, Mom," she whispered, "just like I promised. Liam will stay with you, and I'll be back right after. I'm going to sing our song, the one you used to sing to me when I had bad dreams. I hope somehow you'll know." She straightened up, wiping away the tears that had fallen onto her mother's face. I love you, Mom, so much. Liam touched her arm gently. She knows, Rose, and she's proud of you. I'm sure of it. Rose nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in her throat. With one last look at her mother, she picked up her purse and headed for the door. It was the hardest walk of her life. The theater was buzzing with activity when Rose arrived. Backstage was chaotic. Performers warming up, crew members rushing back and forth, Tom barking orders at anyone who would listen. No one seemed to notice Rose slip in, and she was grateful for the anonymity. She found a quiet corner and sat down, trying to calm her racing heart. Rose, there you are. Tom appeared in front of her, clipboard in hand. I was starting to worry you weren't coming. Liam told me about your mother. I'm so sorry. Rose nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Tom's face softened with genuine sympathy. Look, if you need to back out, I understand. Family comes first. For a moment, Rose was tempted. She could leave right now, go back to the hospital, spend these precious hours with her mother instead of waiting backstage at a small-town talent show that probably didn't matter to anyone but her. But then she remembered her mother's words. You will go. You will sing for me. And she knew she couldn't back out. No, she said. I'm staying. I promised her. Tom nodded, clearly relieved. Good. You're still in the last slot, but Liam mentioned you're changing your song? He didn't give details, just said to trust you. Yes, Rose said. It's a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. It's in Mandarin. Tom raised his eyebrows but didn't argue. Whatever works for you. Just let the sound guy know if you need anything special. And Rose? Yes? Good luck. I mean it. As Tom hurried off to deal with the next crisis, Rose found herself alone again. Around her, the other performers were going through their pre-show rituals. Stretching, vocal exercises, last-minute costume adjustments. They all seemed to know exactly what they were doing. While Rose felt completely out of her depth, she checked her phone. No messages from Liam, that was good, right? It meant nothing had changed, that her mother was still stable. Still waiting. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Rose could hear the audience arriving, their voices a distant murmur beyond the heavy curtains. She tried to practice her song one more time, but the words kept sticking in her throat. What if she froze again? What if her voice failed her? What if, after everything, she couldn't keep her promise? 10 minutes to curtain, someone called. The backstage area immediately went into overdrive, a flurry of last-minute preparations. Rose stayed in her corner, trying to make herself invisible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Still here with your mom. No change, you've got this. She believes in you, and so do I. Rose clutched the phone to her chest, drawing strength from the simple message. She wasn't alone in this. Somehow, against all odds, she had found an ally in this strange, kind man who had volunteered to sit with her dying mother, so that Rose could keep a promise. The showcase began. Rose listened as performer after performer took the stage. The violinist, the opera singer, the dance group. Each was greeted with enthusiastic applause. The audience seemed to be in a good mood, receptive and warm. As the second-to-last act finished their performance, Tom appeared at Rose's side. You're up next, he said. Ready? Rose's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. No, she admitted. But I'm going to do it anyway. Tom squeezed her shoulder. That's the spirit. Then suddenly it was time. Rose heard the MC announcing her name, followed by a smattering of applause that seemed more hesitant than it had been for the other performers. They remembered her audition, she realized. They were expecting another disaster. Rose took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights blinded her for a moment, and she couldn't see the audience. Just a sea of darkness beyond the glare of the spotlights. In a way, it was a relief. She didn't have to see their faces, their expectations, or judgments. Good evening, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I've changed my performance since the audition. Tonight I'd like to sing a song that's very special to me and my mother. It's a traditional Chinese lullaby that she used to sing to me when I was a child. She paused, gathering her courage. My mother is in the hospital right now. She's very ill. I promised her I would be here tonight. This is for her. There was a ripple of murmurs from the audience, a shifting in the darkness. Rose ignored it. This wasn't about them. This was about a promise, about love, about saying goodbye in the only way she knew how. She closed her eyes and began to sing. The first notes were shaky, uncertain. But then something strange happened. As the familiar melody flowed through her, Rose felt a sense of calm settling over her. It was as if her mother was there with her, their voices twining together as they had so many times before. The simple lullaby filled the theater, its gentle cadences and unfamiliar words creating a hush in the audience. Rose didn't need to see their faces to know they were listening, really listening, in a way they hadn't during her audition. There were no snickers, no uncomfortable coughs, just a profound silence as her voice rose and fell with the ancient melody. When she reached the final verse, Rose's voice broke slightly. These were the words her mother had always whispered as Rose drifted off to sleep. Sleep, my child, knowing you are loved. Dream, my child, knowing you are safe. Tomorrow will come bringing new joys, but tonight rest in my love. As the last note faded away, Rose opened her eyes. For a moment there was complete silence. Then, from somewhere in the back of the theater, someone started to clap. Slowly, others joined in until the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with an intensity that took Rose's breath away. But Rose barely heard them, because at that exact moment her phone buzzed in her pocket. With trembling hands, she pulled it out and read the message from Liam. Come back now. Something's changed. Rose didn't wait for the applause to die down. She didn't stop to acknowledge the standing ovation or the tears on many faces in the audience. The moment she read Liam's message, nothing else mattered. She hurried off stage, pushing past surprised performers and crew members, her heart pounding with fear. Rose! Wait, Tom called after her. Where are you going? The audience loves you. My mother, Rose managed to say as she grabbed her purse from the corner where she'd left it. I have to get to the hospital. Understanding dawned on Tom's face. Without another word, he pulled his car keys from his pocket and pressed them into her hand. Take my car. It's the blue Honda in the staff parking lot. Go. Rose didn't waste time thanking him. She ran through the backstage door and into the cool night air, her lungs burning, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. What had Liam meant by something's changed? Had her mother taken a turn for the worse? Was she already gone? The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and fear. Rose ran every yellow light, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She kept hearing her mother's lullaby in her head, the words about sleep and dreams and tomorrow suddenly taking on a more permanent meaning. When she finally reached the hospital, she parked haphazardly and ran through the entrance, not bothering with the elevator, but taking the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor. The hallway to her mother's room seemed endless, stretching before her like something from a nightmare. And then she was there, pushing open the door, bracing herself for what she might find. What she saw stopped her in her tracks. Her mother's eyes were open. Not just open, but clear and alert in a way they hadn't been for days. Liam sat beside the bed holding May's hand, but he looked up when Rose entered, his face a mixture of wonder and confusion. Rose, he said, his voice hushed. I don't understand what's happening. About 20 minutes ago, right around the time you would have been performing, her vitals suddenly improved. Then she opened her eyes and asked for you. Rose moved to the bed in a daze. Mom, she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Can you hear me? Mee turned her head slightly, her gaze finding Rose's face. A small smile curved her lips. My Rose, she said, her voice weak but distinct. You sang our song. Tears spilled down Rose's cheeks. You heard me? But how? I heard you, May confirmed. In my heart I heard you. It was impossible, of course. Her mother had been in a hospital bed unconscious while Rose was performing across town. And yet the timing of her mother's sudden improvement, the way she seemed to know about the song, it defied rational explanation. Rose sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand, which felt warmer now, more present. Yes, Mom, I sang our song. Just like I promised. Were you brave? Rose thought about standing on that stage, about the fear and grief that had threatened to overwhelm her, about singing anyway. Yes, she said. I was brave. May's smile widened. That's all I ever wanted for you. To be brave enough to share your gift, to be yourself without fear. I learned it from you, Rose said. Everything good in me came from you. May's eyes fluttered closed for a moment and fear gripped Rose's heart. But then they opened again. I'm very tired, May said. But I wanted to tell you. I'm so proud of you, Rose, so proud. Please don't go, Rose begged, squeezing her mother's hand. Please stay with me. May looked at her daughter with infinite tenderness. Some journeys we must take alone, my Rose, but I will always be with you in your heart. In your voice when you sing our song. Rose knew what her mother was saying. This brief period of lucidity was a gift, a chance to say goodbye, but it wasn't a miracle cure. The cancer was still there, still doing its destructive work. These moments of clarity were just that, moments. A final flicker of the bright flame that had been Mei Chen. I don't know how to live without you, Rose admitted, her voice breaking. You'll learn, Mei said softly. Day by day, and you won't be alone. Her gaze shifted slightly to where Liam sat quietly, giving mother and daughter their space but still present, still supporting them both. He has a good heart, Mei whispered so only Rose could hear. He sees you, the real you. Rose glanced at Liam, surprised. Even in her condition, her mother had noticed something that Rose herself had barely begun to acknowledge. The connection forming between them. Tentative but real. I'm scared, Rose confessed, turning back to her mother. That's okay, Mei said. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you don't let the fear stop you. Her eyelids drooped again. I'm so tired, Rose, so tired. It's okay, Mom, Rose said, though the words felt like glass in her throat. You can rest now. I'll be okay. I promise. Mei's eyes found her daughter's one last time. Sing to me, she whispered. Our song. Help me sleep. And so there in the quiet hospital room with Liam as their only witness, Rose sang the lullaby again. Her voice was raw with emotion, breaking on certain words, but she kept going, watching as her mother's eyes slowly closed, as her breathing deepened and slowed. By the time she finished the song, Mei was sleeping peacefully, a small smile still on her lips. Rose knew somehow that this sleep was different, that her mother was letting go, finally allowing herself to rest after fighting so hard for so long. Rose stayed by the bed, holding her mother's hand for hours. Liam remained too, a silent source of strength. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medication, their faces gentle with understanding. Just before dawn, Mei Chen took her last breath. It was so quiet, so peaceful that Rose almost missed it. Just a slight change in the rhythm of her mother's breathing, and then stillness. No dramatic final words, no thrashing or gasping, just a gentle slipping away like falling asleep. Rose had imagined this moment many times over the past months, had dreaded it with every fiber of her being. She had expected to fall apart, to be crushed by the weight of her grief. But sitting there, still holding her mother's hand as it grew cool, she felt a strange sense of peace mingled with her sadness. Her mother wasn't suffering anymore. And somehow, impossibly, they had been given the gift of a proper goodbye. The days that followed passed in a blur. There were arrangements to be made, papers to sign, people to notify. Rose moved through it all in a fog, going through the motions of life while feeling oddly detached from it all. Liam stayed close, helping where he could, giving her space when she needed it. He drove her home from the hospital, helped her clean out her mother's things when she was ready, and sat with her during the small memorial service held at the community center. Other people from town came to the service too, more than Rose had expected. The dental office staff where she worked, neighbors from their apartment building, even Tom and some of the performers from the showcase. Your mother was right, Tom told her after the service. You do have a gift, the way you sang that night. People are still talking about it. Rose smiled politely, but the compliment felt hollow. What did it matter now? The one person she had wanted to impress, to make proud, was gone. That evening, after everyone had left and the apartment felt achingly empty, Rose sat at her kitchen table staring at nothing. Liam had offered to stay, but she had sent him home, needing to be alone with her grief. Without conscious thought, she found herself going through her mother's jewelry box, a small lacquered case that had been one of the few items Mei had brought with her when they immigrated from China. Inside were modest pieces, nothing valuable except in sentiment. A jade pendant that had belonged to Rose's grandmother, the simple gold band that had been her mother's wedding ring, and tucked in a small silk pouch, a folded piece of paper Rose had never seen before. With trembling hands, she opened it to find a letter written in her mother's elegant handwriting. My dearest Rose, it began. If you are reading this, it means I have left you. I'm sorry for that. If I could have stayed with you forever, I would have. But know that my love for you doesn't end with my life. It goes on, as you go on. Since you were a little girl, I've seen the light in you, the special gift that makes you shine brighter than anyone else. But I've also seen your fear, the way you hold yourself back from truly living. My greatest regret is that I might have contributed to that fear by making you responsible for me, by keeping you tied to this small town and this small life. So this is my last request, my final gift to you. Be brave, my Rose. Step out into the world. Share your light. Sing your song. Don't wait for permission or approval. Don't hide behind excuses. Live the life that calls to your heart. And when you miss me, when the world seems too big or too frightening, sing our lullaby. I will hear you wherever I am. I will be with you always. All my love now and forever, Mom. Rose clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face, not just tears of grief now, but of gratitude and love and determination. Her mother's final gift had not been the letter itself, but the permission it granted, permission to live, to dream, to be brave. The next morning, Rose called Liam. I need your help with something, she said when he answered. Anything, he replied without hesitation. I want to record our song, the lullaby, professionally. And then, she took a deep breath, remembering her mother's words. Be brave, my Rose. And then I want to perform again. Not just here, not just once. I want to share my voice with the world. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Liam's voice, warm with approval and something more. I think that sounds perfect. When do we start? Today, Rose said, feeling a sense of purpose filling the empty spaces inside her. We start today. 1 year later, Rose stood on a much larger stage in a city far from Riverbrook. Behind her, a full band waited for their cue. Before her, an audience of hundreds sat in expectant silence. This song is for my mother, Rose said into the microphone, her voice clear and confident. She taught me to be brave, to sing my truth. This is our lullaby. As the first notes filled the air and Rose began to sing, she felt her mother's presence all around her, in the music, in the words, in the courage that had brought her to this moment. And somewhere in the audience, Liam watched with pride as Rose Chen finally stepped into the light that had always been hers. Not as a joke, not as someone to be laughed at, but as the star her mother had always known she could be. The audience that had once laughed was now moved to tears.